Hi there. Welcome. My name is Frank Sharry, and welcome to Congressman Mark Takano's first YouTube Town Hall. My name is Frank Sharry. I'm the founder and executive director of a group that works on immigration policy called America's Voice. And over the next hour, we're going to be taking your questions and hearing from Congressman Takano and myself on the topic of comprehensive immigration reform. As you all know, Congressman Mark Takano represents California's 41st Congressional District. And if you would like to participate in tonight's town hall, the way you can do so is to enter questions in the comment section below on the screen, or on Facebook and Twitter using the hashtag Takano Town Hall. Without further ado, let me introduce Congressman Mark Takano, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into it?
Well, thank you, Frank. Thank you for helping me co-host this really a significant event. I believe it's maybe one of the first attempts of a United States congressman to communicate with his constituents via this technology, and I'm really excited. My name is Congressman Mark Takano. I represent the 41st District, which includes the cities of Riverside, Moreno Valley, Jurupa Valley, and the city of Paris, and a lot of unincorporated area known as the Meade Valley. I've been, before I became a member of Congress in last November's election, I worked as a high school teacher. I taught English for 23 years. Some years I taught social studies. I've also been an elected trustee at the Riverside Community College District for 22 years. I am really excited tonight to discuss with members of the public some very important legislation that just passed the Senate not too long ago. The Senate passed its version of comprehensive immigration reform. I'm very excited about what's in it. I'm hopeful that the House will do much to meet the Senate and to include much of what the Senate's already included in their bill. So without any further ado, let's get right to it. We have a number of your questions that you've already submitted to us, and we'll be taking questions this evening. And by the way, I hope this will encourage, this evening's show will encourage many of you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by going to below the screen, press or click on the subscribe button. So, right?
Terrific. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Senate bill. I mean, it is quite remarkable at this time of hyper-partisanship that you have a bipartisan vote of 68 to 32 by more than a 2-to-1 margin in the Senate for comprehensive immigration reform. And it's worth just understanding some of the elements of it, because they interact in a way that really promise to solve this problem in a very significant way. So it combines border security, the toughest border security in American history. Some of us would argue maybe too much in terms of what they ended up in the bill, but very strong border security. A mandatory employment verification system designed to turn off the magnet of unauthorized hiring, so it will be harder in the future for people to come across and get jobs, and it will hold employers accountable to make sure everybody's playing by the same rules. And that's combined with increased legal immigration, both at the low end in terms of agriculture and needed low-skilled workers, as well as additional visas for high-skilled workers for our high-tech companies. And then the part that perhaps is the most controversial, but is nearest and dearest to my heart, and I believe yours, is the idea that 11 million people who are living and working in the United States will have a chance to get legal status, and over many years, if they meet criteria of studying English and paying taxes and keeping a clean record and working hard, can have the option of one day becoming a citizen of the United States. So those are the elements, Mark, and I'm interested in your take. You're a pretty strong advocate of immigration reform. Are you encouraged by the Senate's bill, and do you think the House has a chance to pick up where the Senate left off?
Well, I'm very encouraged by the Senate's bill. There's been a pattern here on Capitol Hill since I was sworn in on January 3rd. And that pattern is the Senate passes important legislation. Anything substantive is passed by the Senate by fairly overwhelming numbers. And that really prompts the House into doing the right thing. It happened with Superstorm Sandy earlier this year, when the House could not vote on a $60 billion bill to help the Northeast after Superstorm Sandy. You might recall that Governor Christie really called out Speaker Boehner and the Republican caucus for their extremism. And lo and behold, in the first 2 weeks of my term, the House, we voted on a package that came to the House floor. And a majority of the House did vote for it, mostly Democrats, and about 60 Republicans voted for it. Same thing happened with the Violence Against Women Act. The same pattern, overwhelming support in the Senate, and the House Republicans grumbling about it, but eventually they recognized that it was important to the right thing, and they allowed a vote on it. And I think that the same thing is going to happen with immigration reform, that it's the right thing for our nation to do. You're seeing former President Bush, both Presidents Bush, Jeb Bush, Grover Norquist, the Wall Street Journal, all conservative voices in our country, joining the progressive voices in our country. When you see that happen, I think you know that that something's going to happen on Capitol Hill. I feel the momentum, despite what we're seeing now in the media, that comprehensive immigration reform is on life support. I think we have a great chance to pass it.
Well, I agree. I think this is the best chance we've ever had. And as someone who worked hard on the Senate bill, I felt like we were in the third quarter of this debate on immigration reform. But as you know, when the things start in the House, we're now in the first quarter of the House debate.
Right.
So we have a way to go. Let's get to some of the questions that people have sent in. Matt Shepard is asking a question. Do you think that granting a path to citizenship will encourage more people to enter the country illegally? Congressman?
Well, Matt, if we adopt the Senate version, or something like it in the Senate version in the House, the answer to your question is no. And here's why. In the Senate bill that was just passed, you need to prove that you've been undocumented in this country, living in this country for at least 2 years prior to the end of 2011. So before December 31st, 2011, you have to document that you've been a resident of the United States for at least 2 years to even qualify for the pathway to citizenship. Now, in addition to that, the Senate bill also contains, fairly strict use. I mean, it mandates that employers will begin to use E-Verify, which is an electronic verification system that employers must use to verify that you are here legally and can work in the country legally. So there's two parts of law. One, the law that states, the part of law states you must you have to document that you've been here for at least 2 years. And I think there'll be a huge disincentive for people to come here if they know they can't so easily get work here.
Yeah, I've been working on immigration policy for 3 decades, and I have to say that this proposal has the best chance of really solving the problem once and for all. No piece of legislation can solve such a complex phenomenon perfectly, but I think we can reduce illegal immigration to a trickle, and I think we can have the incentives so that people here are legal, people who are being hired are here legally, people coming in the future are coming legally. I think we can all agree that coming over the border with a smuggler and being exploited is no comparison to the idea of coming legally and being able to be here with dignity.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions?
We sure do. We have a question on border security. This comes from Kevin Baldwin. How do they plan on funding 20,000 more Border Patrol agents when they can't afford the ones they have now?
Well, Frank, I'm going to mention a few things. You probably are much more an expert on this than I am, but I do know that when people apply for what's known as permanent registered provisional immigrant status, it's not permanent residency. It's not a green card. People cannot get a green card for at least 10 years, and then they have to have that green card for 3 years, for a total of 13 years before they can become a citizen. So what I do know is that they do pay a fine of $1,000 when they apply for this status, and then they have to reapply for an extension of that status, and then when they get the green card, they have to pay another fee there. So there are fees involved, and maybe you can explain more
Yeah,
about how
that's correct. Actually, the Senate bill is self-financing. It will cost taxpayers no money at all. Now, some of the money will come certainly from undocumented immigrants who are applying for this provisional status. But a lot of the money comes from high-tech companies and other employers who will be sponsoring immigrant workers to come in and fill jobs for which Americans aren't available. That's really where the big money comes in.
Well, the big money comes in, so it's not necessarily the $1,000 fines, the accumulation of
That's
those
part
fines.
of it, but a relatively small part of it.
Relatively small part of it. The bigger part of it is going to come from
Microsoft and Oracle and other companies applying for what's called H-1B visas. The fees are going up substantially. So the Border Patrol agents, the increase of 20,000 that was added to the Senate bill that was really responsible for getting enough Republican votes to get it across the finish line, will come from these fees and fines. And in fact, the Congressional Budget Office, which studies these things and how they score bills is very important, they found that this bill, even after the significant expenditures on immigration enforcement, will end up reducing the federal deficit in the first 10 years by something like $138 billion, and in the second 10 years, an additional $650 billion. So almost $1 trillion in deficit reduction from a bill that's self-financing. So if you're a taxpayer who wants strong enforcement, but you don't want to have extra taxes paid for it, this is kind of your bill.
So actually, this bill actually pays for enforcement that we wouldn't pay for otherwise. So we do it.
Right.
If we do it piecemeal, it becomes harder to finance that. I imagine too. Right.
Yeah.
If we try to do just security and enforcement, and we don't tie it to some sort of revenue source, it becomes more.
It's going to be interesting because, as you know, the House Republican leadership says we have to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But if they end up getting to know, and let's hope it doesn't, we both want this bill to pass, something to pass that's really going to be workable. If they get to know all of this extra enforcement that Republicans say they insist on, it's not going to be there.
Wow.
It's not going to be there.
Wow. All right.
Should we get to our next question?
Yes.
Lily Estelle, I hope I've got that correct, Lily. I want to know what the House will do to make sure that families are not split up due to mixed immigration status. So let me explain for our viewers who don't know. It's not like undocumented immigrants live in one neighborhood and immigrants with legal status live in another. They often live in mixed status families, so that think of a wedding or a family reunion with 100 people at it. You might have 50 who have legal status, some citizens, some legal permanent residents, another 20 who have some sort of temporary status, and another 30 who have no status. So this is what the academics call mixed status families. And in recent years, many mixed status families have been broken up by pretty harsh deportation policies. The question is, what can legislation do to help those families who have been suffering family separation in recent years? I'll tell you one thing, Mark, that's not well known. In the Senate bill, not only are there provisions to make sure families can stay united and can reunite more quickly than they can under current law, there's a provision that, quite frankly, makes my progressive heart sing, which is that there's a waiver for people that have been deported away from their loved ones, who have close family members and they were deported due to no...
It's a mother, it could be parents,
yes,
a spouse.
You do know about this provision. You have studied up on this. That's amazing.
I actually have read it.
Oh my God, you've actually worked...
I've actually read the bill, and it's not 1,000 pages. People say it's 1,000 pages. They're exaggerating. It's really, if you do a word count on it, it's actually 300. It's less than an average Harry Potter book. So don't you believe those people who say this is a 1,000-page bill and people haven't read it. It's not the most interesting reading, but
no, it's not.
But so if you have parents or a spouse that was deported,
yes,
but they were here and they were
right, and they were deported. It wasn't for criminal activity. It was just for being here without papers.
That's right. The only crime you committed was being without papers, and it's not like you were deported because you committed a felony, something, a violent crime or something like that.
Right.
You can apply for what's called registered provisional immigrant status, and so there's hope for these families to be reunited. That is.
It's a remarkable thing. Many families that have been ripped apart are going to have the chance to be reunited if this bill gets across the finish line.
I have to believe that's why there's some actual, conservative Christian groups. That have, I care about, we all care about families, but I am really hopeful. I'm seeing so many elements of America come together behind this. Out of just sheer, recognition of humanity. That's what's wonderful.
Mark, I'm interested in your district. Do you come across young people who call themselves dreamers? I mean, you've also been an educator.
I've actually taught students and personally experienced the despair of some very, very talented students who said, Mr. Takano, I don't know how I'm going to be able to go to college. Why should I even put effort into working hard? And I'd have to take them aside and say, well, you just need to work really hard and just have a faith that our country is going to do the right thing. Of course, California is one of the states that has passed the California Dream Act.
Yes.
And what does that mean? Who are dreamers? Dreamers are people, are young people who came to this country through no fault of their own. They were brought here by their parents. They might have been little kids, they might have been teenagers, they were below the age of 18. Many of them are culturally American. They may not speak, a lot of them are Latinos, but a lot of them are from Asia, other countries. Right. They don't even speak the language they came from. If they were to be sent back to their home countries, it would be a very cruel thing to do. It's like putting an American in a foreign country and saying, we're going to send you there. And so the DREAM Act is, about people who dream who aspire to be Americans and want to partake in the American dream. And so we call these kids dreamers as a kind of shorthand. And I'm happy to say that this legislation from the Senate gives them a fast track and does not burden them with the fines that their parents or adults undocumented will have to pay. They have a 5-year instead of a 13-year pathway. They have to have graduated from high school. They have to. Is that right? They think. They have to.
Or have served in the military.
Served in the military. If you're below the age of 18, still you're one of these younger dreamers. Of course, those conditions won't apply. But as a teacher, I can say that this is a very humane thing to do. It's going to mean that we can take advantage of some really, really wonderful students. There's been some examples of even some people in medical school who were dreamers, and it's just crazy that we would throw roadblocks in their way. But people struggling because they have to pay out-of-state tuition, and this, if we could simplify it and avail these young people and invest in them, they're going to be good for our country.
They are inspiring, and the idea of.
Well, I'll tell you, Frank. Someone who was the president of the Riverside City College campus student body. She was the president, and she was a dreamer.
Wow. And
then she had transferred to UCR, which, and as you know, getting into the UC system is really quite an achievement. It's much harder to become a student at the UC system these days. She was a dreamer. She's an example of what I'm talking about.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Head of the student body. Yeah. All right, let's go back to some of the questions we have here. Our next question comes from Kenneth Smith. He asks, what do you think is the best way to keep the good immigrants that can contribute to our society and keep out the ones that are criminals? So this is a question that I get a lot. I'm not sure that people understand that in this bill and under current law, if you commit a crime, you're gone.
Yeah. I mean, you're under much heavier pressure than, definitely more pressure than native-born citizens. I mean, you can commit crimes in this country if you're a citizen, and you will never have your citizen stripped of you. Under this bill, during your registered provisional immigrant status, which is 13 years long, You commit 3 crimes and you're
Three
done.
misdemeanors or a felony, you're out of here.
1 felony, right? Is it
One felony.
1 felony. And before you can even, there's a background check. When you apply for registered provisional immigrant status, there's a background check. If there's any criminal history, no go, no status. You're not on the pathway to citizenship. More than this, on the other side of this is this bill does encourage and give a pathway for our companies like Facebook, Google, our high-tech companies, not just internet companies, but our biotech firms, people who the companies that need people who have PhDs in the sciences and mathematics to retain some of our best graduate students and to actually bring in folks. A good chunk of our medical doctors are actually foreign trained. We have a great and wonderful country. People still want to come here because we are such a dynamic society and dynamic economy. And I mean, the way we benefit and keep our edge is that we stay true to our values, and people. We're an attractive country, no doubt about it. But we attract some of the best minds around the world into our country.
Can I ask you about your district when you travel and you talk to employers? Do people talk about immigration and its role in the growth of their companies? What kind of employers, what kind of workers they're looking for?
Yes, they talk about the need. Well, I actually have agricultural concerns. So they tend not to need the highly skilled, but they need the most motivated workers. And agricultural work is sweaty, hot. I mean, especially in the hot Southern California sun in the desert, it's really, really hard work. If you're around citrus, you know that there's thorny trees.
They call it unskilled, but it's actually quite highly skilled.
Quite highly skilled, but not very few native-born Americans are really willing to do that sort of work, and that's the truth. We benefit from comparatively low-cost food compared to other countries, and part of the reason why is we've had agricultural workers who are immigrants come in. So there's a great need for agricultural workers. I mean, they're really the farmers I know are really. This is one of the top priorities after water in California.
Indeed, and there's a very strong
I've
provision in this.
I've been to Silicon Valley and I've spoken to employers there, and they're very worried about having a workforce that is really highly skilled and highly trained. And look, we like it or not, I mean, we did pass the Affordable Health Care Act. It's going to give, in my district, 20% more people access to medical insurance. We are facing a shortage of medical doctors. We have a new School of Medicine at the University of California, Riverside, but it's, we're going to need to bring in as many foreign trained doctors as possible. That's going to be part of what we do to meet the new needs there.
Terrific. All right, let's go to our next question. This is a question from Deb Meeker. She asks, how can the GOP deny bipartisan immigration reform after every single demand they had was met by the Senate bill? Sorry, I have to, Deb, near and dear to my heart, your question, because Lord knows, especially this border security amendment gave Republicans everything they wanted, a doubling of the border patrol. You've got triggers in the bill that will make it hard for people to complete the path to citizenship unless the security measures such as mandatory e-verify and an entry-exit system and the extra border patrol and the extra fencing are in place. And yet, Mark, when the bill came over here to the House, and we're sitting in a beautiful House building here, some of the Republicans said, not good enough.
Yeah, I think these Republican members come from districts, frankly, where a lot of these Republicans they're scared of facing a primary opponent that's going to play upon the fears of the people in our districts. And that's just sort of the downside of states that drew such polarized districts. In California, we had an independent commission do it, not a politically motivated state legislature. And so, we're seeing some of the structural consequences. So some of it, some of these Republicans, I believe, are not as harsh as what they make out to be. I mean, really, if they didn't have such districts where they were always looking over their right shoulder, protecting their right flank, they might be more reasonable. Even so, oddly enough, I believe that if the Senate bill was able to come to the floor right now, it'd have a strong chance of passing. In fact, Harry Reid states categorically that it would pass the House by strong numbers. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I've already told you earlier in the show,
So you need 218 votes. How many? And
votes.
there's 201 Democrats. How many Democrats do you think would vote for it? What's your guess?
My guess is close to 195, maybe even.
Right.
We'd lose.
That's right.
We'd lose one or two, maybe 4 or 5. But if someone like Darrell Issa, who is Darrell Issa is somebody that's taken the president to task on the IRS law, but he's come out and said he believes in a pathway to citizenship, which is the sticking point of Republicans. If someone like Darrell Issa is saying that, I have to believe Darrell Issa probably represents maybe another 20, 25 votes. And I bet you there's more votes out there on the Republican side. I think the struggle is how to just bring this bill to the floor. So I don't know if I even want to sort of speculate out loud because I don't want to give away the game, but but maybe.
Right. Well, you mentioned some of these other bills before. Can we just? So Speaker Boehner seemed to be pressured from his right flank into saying we have to observe this so-called Hastert rule, the majority of the majority. If the bill was brought up right away, 25 Republican votes added to the Democrats and it would pass.
Right.
But he says we need something like 120 Republicans.
Right.
I mean, honestly, has he stuck to that through thick and thin, or is that something he has to say? What's your take on that?
Well, why would they feel compelled to do it, suddenly invoke it now when they clearly didn't do it on Superstorm Sandy funding, when they didn't do it on the Violence Against Women Act? There's a time when you have to do something for the country, for the good of the country, that you have to overcome these procedural roadblocks. Let me just say, let me mention again, if you like what you're hearing or you find this engaging information, please subscribe to my YouTube channel by going to at the bottom of the screen below the image here. There's a subscribe button. Click on that, and you'll have access to our content on YouTube. Let's see. Do we have any more questions coming?
We do. This is a question that comes from Max Cotterill. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Max. If immigration passes, what changes will we see immediately?
Well, I don't know how immediate this will happen, but Max, interesting enough, in our own press enterprise, about a month ago, was published a piece. In fact, let me get the reporter's name, because I know a lot of our viewers are from Riverside. It's written by Dave Olson, and he actually took the idea for this article from the Washington Post. There was analysis done on how immigrants, if they have a pathway, they're somehow documented in this country and are eligible to buy homes, that housing values will actually go up. Now, in the short term, it'll also mean that rents go up. But in the Inland Empire, we've got to, we were ground zero for the mortgage crisis, and we have a lot of people whose mortgages are sort of underwater. They're upside down in their home values. I think that we have a great chance of clearing out this problem by having immigrants who, they form. They're very entrepreneurial. They're very eager. They often have young families. They want to get into homes. They're going to add, I think, a force in the housing market. Also, in the aggregate, nationally, most economists believe that our economy will grow faster if we allow immigrants to come in full force, come out of the shadows. And interesting enough, it manifests itself in that immigrants are not afraid to suddenly demand that they're paid the minimum wage, for example.
Right.
And look, they're not taking jobs from people. They already are doing these jobs.
Exactly right.
It's just that employers, so let's get that straight. They already are doing these jobs. It's not like they're taking jobs from people. But see what happens. They demand the minimum wage. They get paid slightly higher. But that adds up incrementally.
It does.
And what does that mean? It means they spend more money in the economy. That's more demand. And that's one of our problems in our economy right now. Not enough demand. So more demand will multiply in a kind of very interesting way, which will mean actually more employment for those who are incumbent citizens here.
Exactly. Yeah. No. The research on this, the economics is really clear. I'm sure you saw David Brooks, the conservative columnist for the New York Times. This gets back to Deb's question about why the excuses. And he just slayed all of the arguments against the bill coming from some in the Republican Party. He says, you want to reduce illegal immigration? This bill does it. You want to reduce the deficit? This bill does it. You want to grow the economy? This bill does it.
Those are really better. Even what you just said. If you want to reduce the deficit, be for comprehensive immigration reform. If you want to make Social Security more secure, you want to put Social Security. It actually extends the solvency period. And why is that? Well, immigrants are largely of working age. We have incumbent citizens, people who are citizens now. We have a lower birth rate. Frankly, we're less fertile. People tend to have less children once they're more well-to-do, oddly enough. But the immigrants are, they're younger. They have children. These children are going to populate our country and be the source, the human resource. Countries like Japan and in Europe, the European countries are in trouble because their populations are aging and they don't have quite the same kind of mechanism for immigrants to be welcomed into the economy.
Here's another question, and this may be a technical question, and maybe Max wanted some clarification. This is from Rashid Nawaz. Rashid asks, after passing immigration reform, how much time is required for RPI status? Let me just, if I could, because I think maybe Max was asking, what happens immediately? If the bill is signed into law, what will happen is that anyone who is what they call prima facie eligible, anyone who can make a showing that they would be eligible for this RPI status, cannot be detained and deported. So the sort of deportation machinery that is in place now, of course, unless you commit a serious crime. If you commit a crime, you're still going to be deported. But if you're driving without a license, or your police at a checkpoint stop you, and you can say, look, I'm eligible for this, you will be able to be let go immediately. It'll take about a year to set up the program before you can apply for RPI status. And then we expect the eligibility period for the application. They had to say 1 year in the bill, but there's an extension for 18 months. So we think it'll be about 2.5 years. But the other question is, what happens, how long are you in RPI status before you can be eligible for permanent residency or a green card?
It's 10 years for RPI status. If unless you are a dreamer, or unless you are also proven to can document you've worked in agricultural industries.
Correct.
In which case you have a fast track. It's 5 years for dreamers. I think it's like 6 years or something like that for, I forget.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
Not 100% sure, but you have to document that status. I think it's an initial 6-year status, and then an additional.
You have to go through a renewal.
Renewal after those 6 years. You have to renew that. So it's sort of a trial period. You're on provisional status, and you have to really kind of earn your way here.
Look, for many advocates, let's be honest, it feels very long. We're glad about the Dreamers getting fast track. We're glad that agricultural workers will have a bit of a faster track. There's even people who have temporary protected status who have been here for 10 years who will immediately move towards citizenship. But why the 10 years? And I'll tell you, the main reason is this, is that there's an interaction between the legalization process and the changes in family immigration. So right now, there's over 4 million people who are waiting in line to come into the United States through family sponsorships. And there's an argument, I think it's a solid one, that look, the people who are waiting in line shouldn't be put at the disadvantage of people who are here without papers. So the way the system is going to work is that all 4.7 million people in the backlog will have to come into the United States over a decade before the first person who's legalized with RPI status can then get a green card. Because when you come in on a family visa, you get a green card right away. The equity consideration is people who are waiting in line should get their green cards before people who are getting legalized.
This question comes up a lot, I see online. So the Senate bill requires that the backlog be taken care of first before anybody of the 11 million here who are undocumented receive a green card. They cannot get a green card before the people who were in line legally. So I want to repeat that because I hear a lot of complaints. Why I've been waiting in line legally, and why should these people? Your concern has been taken care of. If you've been in line and you followed the rules, you under this law have priority over the other people who are trying to apply to come in. Now, let me also say that the other immediate thing to answer Max's, there are other answers to Max's question in order to make it more complete. The Secretary of Homeland Security has to establish a plan to secure the southern border.
Right.
They have to certify a plan. Even before we can, there's some triggers in the law. They have to certify that even after the plan, there's a process by which the plan has to be implemented and shown to be effective. If not, there's a border commission that's going to be set up, and before anybody can get a green card, they're going to have to take care of the border. So the border security does come first prior to anyone actually getting the citizenship.
That's exactly right.
So there's a whole mechanism for the border security stuff to also be put in place immediately after the bill is passed.
Well, the questions are rolling in, Congressman. So
okay, we're going to move on.
Here we go. This is from Samala. What happens to immigration reform if the House refuses to vote on the Senate bill and/or doesn't draft one of their own?
Well, I'm sorry to say that if that scenario comes to pass, then it'll be a heartbreak for 11 million people. It'll be a heartbreak for me, and I think we'll have diminished possibilities because of that. We'll still be America, no doubt about that. We're still a great country, not as great a country as I would have hoped that we could be. The simple answer is that it takes both the House and the Senate to agree on the same bill for the President to sign it, and otherwise it doesn't become law.
Yeah. All right. Our next question comes from Zenaidia 211. Will all employers be required to use E-Verify?
My understanding is yes. It's going to be phased in, I think, over a 5-year period. But both large and small employers will have to use it.
And they start with the biggest employers, I think, and then they try to give small business a chance
to kind of. There's some expense involved in using E-Verify, the technology, etc. And they're going to have to work out the bugs. There's going to be some mistakes.
But that's the deal. I mean, the idea is, you legalize 11 million people so that they have status, and you make sure that employers are held accountable for who they hire going forward. The combination is probably our best chance ever to have an immigration system in which immigrants are here legally, they're on a path to citizenship, and the people who come in the future come legally. Let's go to Chris Bittner. Why do we need immigration reform? We already have laws in place. All we need to do is enforce them. Please tell me why this reform is any different.
Well, there are some differences from the last time that we did reform in 1986. Actually, there is enhanced border security, which is paid for by by giving a pathway to both the 11 million people who are already here. Is it Chris? You said was it Chris's question?
Yes, Chris Bittner.
Chris, we have to really grapple with this 11 million undocumented number. I want you for a moment just to imagine what it would mean to enforce what the law is to the letter. Just how, in this case, how impractical that would be. I mean, to try and round up 11 million people and send them on their way, the expense of that, just the sheer cost of that, what that would do to our society, it's very complicated. I mean, there's complex relationships. It's not like Frank said earlier, these 11 million people just live in separate neighborhoods. They're often in mixed households. You'd be separating families. You'd be disrupting businesses. I mean, it's not like these people are unemployed. So on the one end, I think it's very extreme what people aren't really thinking when they say, why can't we just enforce the law? Well, enforce the law, would that mean mass deportations of 11 million people? I think they really thought about it, they would see that's kind of unreasonable. Yet, I think there is some validity to the argument that, hey, people broke the law. They need to, but what's proportionate to that breaking of law? I mean,
right.
We can't throw these 11 million people in jail either. That would be very costly. I think the law does attempt to address that by saying you have a fine to pay. You don't get citizenship right away. You still have to kind of do some sort of penance, a 10-year penance. I mean, you don't get, if you're paying taxes all this time, you're not able to actually really benefit from those taxes.
No services.
No services. So I mean, there's a compromise. I mean, sometimes in the law, you have to recognize reality, and to just say, enforce the law is not always the practical or right thing to do. But yet we are a nation of laws, and I think we've got to sort of reconcile. The law is also about balance.
Yeah.
Also about balance and a sense of fairness and a sense of compassion. You can't apply the law without compassion. I think we have a lot to gain as a country by recognizing the reality of 11 million people be here. Most of these people, I mean, the absolute, most of these folks are hardworking people. They're of working age. They're younger. They're going to make our country stronger, and we need to square how we do it with the legal realities.
Yeah. I want to take a crack at this question too, Chris, because look, the reason we came up with this whole idea of comprehensive reform is the following. We have gone from 1,000 Border Patrol agents to 21,000 Border Patrol agents over the last 2 decades. We have 650 miles of fencing. The problem is that we have a keep out sign at the border and a help wanted sign about 100 yards in. So what do you do about that? The proposal is mandatory e-verify. So you make every employer accountable, and if they hire people who are here illegally, they get stiff fines, and it becomes a new labor market norm that we're not going to wink and nod and look the other way. But if you do mandatory e-verify when you have 8 of the 11 million unauthorized or undocumented immigrants in the country working, what happens to those people? Are they going to pick up and go home? That self-deportation thing has been tried in a few states. Doesn't work. What it does is it tends to drive people further underground, where you have people more scared, where they're more, it's easier to take advantage of them and to exploit them. And so the employers who are gaming the system reap the benefits, and the decent employers get undercut, and American workers get undercut as well, while immigrant workers are exploited. The idea is to clean the slate, bring those workers out of the shadows so that everyone is starting on a level playing field. Well, what do you do about the people coming in the future? You make sure that if they come legally. And that's why you have visa programs at the low end and the high end of the labor market that complement rather than substitute workers. That's the idea. That's how it all works together. I hear from your question is you want this problem stopped. It's my honest view that comprehensive immigration review gives us the best chance, not to stop it completely, because we're not going to have a Berlin Wall. Even the Berlin Wall wasn't 100%. But we're going to have a system where we have very strong enforcement with different layers of it, and we're going to have a functioning legal immigration system, so the incentives are for employers and workers to get together legally, and we're not going to have 11 million people who are subject to exploitation and live outside the framework of our laws. That's the combination. So I get your urgency. I'm hoping that you see that this combination of elements really gives us a chance to have a 21st century immigration system that could solve the problem. All right, I'll get off my hobby horse and we'll get on to the next question. Tom Sicarda, during the background check, if a criminal record is found, what happens to the person? Are they sent home? I wonder if he may be asking about the process by which people come forward and apply for the RPI status or the registered. I actually don't know the answer to this question. I think this is one that's going to be worked out in regulation.
Yeah, I do know that the intent of the law is that that you don't get RPI status, you don't get registered provisional status if you have a criminal record. We're talking a serious criminal record here. I mean, if you committed crimes, I imagine violent crimes where you've been fraudulent or something. Clearly the law is attempted to root out people who are a detriment to society. So you would,
that's sure.
But as far as the actual legal process, that's something I think that usually goes to a regulatory determination by probably the Justice Department, or someone's going to have to lay down these regulations.
Here's the other thing that's become increasingly true in recent years, is that even if you have a minor infraction, if you're here in the country without papers, you get turned over to ICE or the Border Patrol and put on the process to detention and deportation. There are people here who don't have papers who have committed crimes, but I suspect they're not going to be the ones who are coming forward to apply for this because they know that they won't be eligible for it and they could get picked up. But to a large extent, even people who have committed very minor infractions have been sucked up. We're deporting 400,000 people a year.
Yeah,
it's a record.
Yeah, to the prior person's, was Chris's question about why don't we just enforce the law?
Chris. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chris, it's very expensive to try to enforce the law. We could allocate more and more money to enforcement, but it is expensive to deport people. I'm not saying don't. This administration has deported, believe it or not, the Obama administration has deported record numbers of people under the 1986 law. That's part of the unworkability. It seems a little bit odd to say that, but why is it unworkable? It's incredibly expensive to do it because you have to go through a whole process, and you wouldn't want just a roughshod enforcement because you don't want to pick up people who are American citizens. You have to do it right. So we've deported more people. This administration has deported more people. You said it's like 400,000.
400,000 a year.
400,000.
It's a record. It's record rates, and the priority is, of course, people who have had any kind of criminal infractions.
Criminal infractions, and I believe that the administration was correct to defer deportations of deferred actions on young kids. What use is it to try to use the enforcement mechanisms now? So the law is being enforced now. We could make a choice that so why not enforce the law now? We could spend a lot more money, but it still doesn't solve the problem of how do we solve this problem for the future. How do we implement E-Verify? The structure of this law actually pays for itself, as you said.
All right, we've got a couple more questions that we want to get in before our town hall ends. Let's see. Maria de Garcia, I've paid taxes. What are my chances of becoming legal, even if immigration reform does not pass?
Well, I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah,
I think probably.
I don't think we should do legal assistance by town hall. But
I think I think it's very difficult for. I mean, I think that's your best hope is immigration reform.
for many people, it is, right? I mean, see, this is the myth. I mean, Maria knows she wants to be in the system,
Yeah.
and if there's no line to get into, what does she do? It takes an act of Congress to create a line for Maria to get into so that she can get right with the law.
Well, it says she pays taxes, so she could mean that she's paying sales taxes, or
Actually, many undocumented, unauthorized workers
aren't actually paying.
They're paying their Social Security and FICA taxes,
and also income tax. Probably some of them.
Some of them are using what's called an ITIN and paying many are actually paying income taxes, which sounds like that's what they're doing.
So here's a person who's actually working, and it's very difficult for anyone to fraudulently sort of get other kind of public benefits. So here's the case of someone who's working and wants, as you say, wants to be part of the system. So the best hope for Maria is that we pass comprehensive immigration reform.
And Maria, I've been working on this for 3 decades. Again, we've never had a better chance than we have this year. If, God forbid, it doesn't happen, don't give up hope. I think we've turned the corner. I think that it's a matter of when, not if. And with folks like Congressman Takano and many others, I just think that you see Democrats really leaning into this in a way that sometimes in the past some Democrats didn't. You have Republicans really seeing that it's an imperative for the economy and for their political future and for what's right. So I think that we can't give up hope. I think we're on the road to victory. It's just a matter of when. All right, let's see. Our next question comes from Ali Hassan. Have the House Dems considered a plan to use a discharge petition to move the Senate bill along? Ali, are you a plant? This is one of our secret ideas, and we're now talking about it on a YouTube town hall.
Well, actually,
you might want to explain what a discharge petition
is.
I
saw this on Rachel Maddow was like kind of daring us.
Yes.
So a discharge petition is actually a petition that's started by members of the Congress, members of the House. So Speaker Boehner has a lot of power as a speaker when he says, I'm going to invoke the Hassett rule. If a majority of my caucus, the Republican caucus, does not want this, then I'm not going to bring it to the floor under the rules of procedure. But there's a way out of that, which is if members of the House sign a petition and we get to 218, that already says that that constitutes now the will of the House. I suppose that's sort of the House equivalent of the nuclear option.
It is.
Right? It's our nuclear option. I suppose, the thought has entered my mind. Well, that's actually correct. It's not that I suppose. The thought has entered my mind. So there are ways to go around it. But, I don't know if Leader Pelosi said that's sort of, that's way, an option that's kind of way down. There are some consequences to moving in that direction. But it's not something that would be impossible.
Well, I hope we keep it as a live option because if the House Republicans, and I know this is probably where Ali is coming from, if they say no to everything and the Democrats go on defense, it'll put enormous pressure on those 25 Republicans who could make the difference. But let's hope that before we get to what is the House version of the nuclear option, that the House will be able to work through its own divisions and get to yes. All right, we have time for just one more question. All right, our last question comes from Aaron Morin. Please explain what is going to happen for agricultural workers and farmers that need help on their fields and crops.
Okay.
This is complicated.
It's complicated.
But it's a good news story, right?
It is. I think it's called a blue card.
It's called a blue card.
Yeah, it's called a blue card.
I think the way I understand the concept. Some of the particulars are very, very technical in nature. The idea is that farm workers who are here, and it's some estimates as much as 85 to 90% of the current workforce are here without papers, that they would get a blue card, short of a green card, if they work a certain number of days in agriculture each year, they will be eligible for a green card faster than the others who are on the 10-year track. Mm-hmm. The idea, as I understand it, is that there's a tremendous amount of fear on the part of growers that if they give status to their most experienced farmhands and they all leave willy-nilly, it'll create a huge labor shortage that could leave crops rotting on the vines. And so the idea is to incentivize those who want to leave agriculture can, but those who want to get on an accelerated path through a blue card to a green card will work a certain number of days. In other words, it's a transition as the new temporary worker program kicks in, a temporary worker program which has a balance of worker protections and easier access for employers. The farm worker advocates and the agricultural producers negotiated this approach. So I think it's a good news story where we'll stabilize the current labor force, legalize the current labor force, and allow for a legal supply of workers in the future, but with worker protections so that the hardest and some of the poorest workers in America aren't participating in the harvest of shame of the old Bracero program.
Now, if those of you who are watching tonight, if you appreciate the information, that was great information, Frank, on agricultural workers. If you appreciate the information that you're gaining from tonight's town hall that we're doing via YouTube, please subscribe to my channel. At the bottom of your screen, there's a subscribe button. If you click on, you will have access to information. We'll send you information on our future our webcast. I guess this is called a webcast via YouTube. So be sure to subscribe.
So Mark, we're just about to close up here. There's, by the way, terrific questions from I suspect many of them from your district. So you have a very engaged electorate there. How are you feeling about reform? I mean, we do have a House Republican leadership that's been iffy on this. On the other hand, Speaker Boehner said we have to do something. They're clearly divided. What do you think the chances are? Are you optimistic?
Well, as optimistic as, say, Winston Churchill about our country. He used to say, one thing about Americans, they always do the right thing after trying everything else. So it's like, I kind of keep that attitude. I also like Hubert Humphrey. Hubert Humphrey, they used to call him the happy warrior.
Yeah, that's right.
He would go through his disappointments, his share of losses, but he would always keep an optimistic and happy spirit. And I think we need to. I try to in this Congress. This how rancorous it is, and also, I just finished reading The Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns.
Sure.
About Lincoln. Lincoln was an amazing guy. He hired into his cabinet the people who were his rivals for the presidency. So after reading that book, the country was actually driven to civil war. The divisions of that. So we're nowhere near that. So I come to work every day here on Capitol Hill, knowing that we're divided as a people in our opinions, but in the end, like I believe, like Churchill said, Americans in the end will do the right thing after they try everything else.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your leadership on this issue. I want to thank all the people who have participated in this town hall. I'll add my 2 cents. You read the newspaper articles and up one day, down another, and what that obscures is that the fundamentals driving this debate are pretty strong. Mm-hmm. Public support, in California, the field poll, which is considered the gold standard, I think support in California for a path to citizenship is like 90% now. Yeah. A vast majority of Republicans as well as Democrats support it.
Yeah.
And that's now becoming true nationwide. The public's behind it. You have a broad coalition across the spectrum: evangelicals, business, conservatives, Catholic Church, labor unions, Latino and Asian groups. It's a remarkable thing.
It's a huge chance for this Congress to dig itself out of its hole.
That's right.
Our opinions about this Congress are so low. If we can tackle immigration reform, it'll do so much to restore the stature of this institution.
Well, again, thank you, Congressman Takano. Thanks to all of you for engaging, and let us know what you think of Congressman Mark Takano's first YouTube town hall. Thank you.
Thank you and good night.